Hello, welcome to the Rivero Success Story podcast. I'm Tracy, your host, and I'm here today with Vicki, and she is going to share with us her success on the carnivore diet. Hi, Vicki.
Hi, Tracy.
So glad you came, and I can't wait to hear your story. Can you begin by telling me what was your life like, your health conditions, and the foods that you ate prior to coming to a meat-based diet?
Well, it's to go back there, I have to rewind about 25 years. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow description of every health issue. A, because they were numerous, and B, because it was a pretty dark time in my life. So back into my late teens, early 20s is really, whether you say you're blessed or cursed with these health conditions early, that you have to get your mind around. But I've probably spent a good 25 years working out the optimal nutrition for me. I don't like having a life of regrets, but if someone had grabbed me back then in my early 20s and told me that the carnivore or animal-based diet could have worked, I would have been potentially looking at a different 20 years. And so on the flip side, though, I feel kind of blessed to experience all of these hard times because it now hopefully gives me that ability with my education and research and extensive experience to then empower others. Without giving you a blow by blow, I now understand that all of these health issues now come under this umbrella of, an underlying inflammation at the core, and that they can be grouped rather than, the hard times I had visiting various specialists, which I'll sort of illuminate a little bit more. So I guess thanks to great genes, I've always been really active. So I've pursued, endurance running as a kid, later netball, that's an Australian sport mostly, rowing, those sorts of things. And I was incredibly active. And in my late sort of teens, as I said, early 20s, I would come home from school and I would devour 3 bowls of cereal. So in Australia, that looks like Weet-Bix. That's our kind of national cereal diet, or Vitabrits. Then it would be Just Right, another sort of sugary cereal. Then it would be maybe Nutri-Grain, which was touted on the TV as the breakfast of champions for Iron Men and Iron Women. And then I'd say to Mum, when's dinner? Then I'd couple that, I was just always exercising and always moving, participating in team sports, individual sports, and constantly hungry. And, I had, as I said, good physique and good genes, but that was the diet. And I don't blame my mother, who was in control of dishing out our family's nutrition, because she was just following the food pyramid guidelines at the time. And it did sort of deviate a little bit into Italian. In Sydney, where I grew up, it's a multicultural area. So my British parents' meat and 3 veggies sort of evolved into lasagnas and pastas and breads. And that's all really nutritious, right? Like, it's pretty much what our standard or sad Australian diet would be. Grain heavy, fruit focused. Lunch boxes weren't horrendous, they were fruits in there, which is good for us, right? And the sultanas that are yogurt covered, and the chocolate here and there. But on the whole, it looked like a good diet, but pretty carbohydrate heavy. I recognize now that, coupled with my genes, so nature, I've got autoimmune disease history in my family. So my dad has type 1 diabetes. We've got Hashimoto's, thyroiditis. We've got a litany of family tree stuff. But coupled with that heavy carbohydrate, sugar-based diet, it led to some pretty serious health issues in my early 20s. Which, as I said, they were pretty horrendous. So gut health, for a start, I would present to hospital and outpatient clinics that usually people in their elderly would present with. So, fairly looking at for sinister things like bowel cancer, and that's not pleasant as an early 20-year-old. Menstrual dysfunction, I was a late starter for and they'd vary from 28 days to 45 plus. So that irregular nature. They'd have me flat for day 1 or 2 on my back, not being able to study or go to school or function. And that was quite serious, particularly when you tried to add something like running onto that. That dysfunction was later diagnosed as polycystic ovary syndrome, which is, it's a global epidemic for many women and quite silent. It even though I was very on the outside, very fit and aesthetically, looked pretty good, on the inside, my body was hurting. And, I can't imagine how much I've spent on skincare products to address, those embarrassing acne and stuff that comes with PCOS, or facial hair for women. So someone in their 20s, it can be really quite crippling. And yet I'm fair skinned and I don't have a background of an Italian or Greek. And that was just very, hard to know where to turn. And I also think that PCOS played out later in my mid-30s when I went to have children and I had a string of miscarriages. So that hormonal imbalance, which comes from what I now understand as an insulin resistance at its core, was really hard. And then, so my gut health was a real problem. I would front up at cycling races. So I was later a cyclist in life, and I'd have to be very near those 30 minutes before that race. I'd have to be very near the toilet block, because everything it felt like I'd consumed 3 hours before would just go straight through me, and you feel energy depleted. The worst I've been was when I recovered from a bout of Epstein-Barr virus and chronic fatigue, and I decided that a raw food diet with juicing and everything was the worst for my body. And again, putting context to that now, all of these things seem separate, and yet they all come under that one big issue. I guess I was fed up with running, so I later went to cycling. And I'll backtrack slightly, because the other big health issue, which was the mental stuff that I had, I feels like as long as I can remember, I've been in, counseling and psychology, and again, spending so much money on that facet, which is not all addressed by diet, but a big chunk is. I'd find myself also joint pain. That was a big key. So I was trying to run half marathons, and I had both knee pain, both shins, both feet, ankles. I was seeing podiatrists, I was seeing physiotherapists, and again, spent lots of money and resources on that sort of stuff, with the only real solutions from a medical point of view was to strap or tape your joints every time you want to run. I was an exercise physiologist in training at the time, and I thought, well, I'll try and rehabilitate my musculoskeletal system. I'll do that part well, but still not really addressing any nutritional facet to this. From a medical hormonal point of view, it was advised that I go on the pill, go on the oral contraceptive, because that's going to, address my issues. And at the time, I didn't know much, but I thought that was crazy, that we're going to give ourselves an external hormone to address an endogenous hormone imbalance. It was a crazy idea. So luckily I avoided that and found, long story short now, a functional medicine sort of doctors and naturopathic world, which talked about healing the body from inside. And in my early 20s, yes, I did start to go a little bit more whole foodish. Look, I omitted glutens and grains were the big ones. And we know in this world now that lectins and the anti-nutrients in plants, I was figuring out, 15 years ago that they were problematic. The way I was able to continue, say, some of the plant foods was to really denature their compounds. So to soak them excessively, to boil the heck out of them, to microwave them even, so that I could consume things. And as an elite level cyclist, I had, the sports dietitians helping me tweak my diet, because it wasn't pasta and bread centric. It was quinoa as our super grain. It was sweet potato, which I now no longer tolerate, and rice, a little bit of white rice. And that, helped me sustain a really high level athlete diet. And it kept me at bay until the more current time, and I'm talking the last 3 years. So that's life before the diet. It was transitioning to lower carbohydrates. It was more whole food. It was less processed, but I still had health issues.
Yeah. So you think your health issues all stemmed from insulin resistance? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, I do now because of my further study. And as I said, it feels like in my early 20s, I've studied the heck out of nutrition in an informal way. And now, yeah, so I'm an exercise physiologist, and I now help my clients look to nutrition as the first and foremost thing because of, and there's still hypotheses, a lot of them are saying we need more research, we need more this. I believe that insulin is an actual key hormone, and for its messaging to the other hormones, including the female hormones. And we know from studies, the PCOS particularly has links to insulin resistance. And I listen with much interest to the likes of Ben Bickmans in this world. And I'm incredibly, I think it comes back to that in a big way. So even though they all look disconnected, as I said, I really feel that you can really hit the nail on the head if you start by managing that hormone. And the problem is, or my messaging is to it's still relatively unknown, and the GPs in certainly our country are not testing for that. And I think they're leaving a whole lot of things untouched and undiagnosed and not with optimal therapy. But that's another side. That's besides my personal.
Well, well, you have really actually been through so much in such a young age too. So how did you find out about the carnivore diet, and how did you implement it?
So really, we can rewind to 2019. So I'd retired from professional cycling. I had a child. And then, as I said, after that first child, I had a string of miscarriages. So that was still, obviously a number of causes for miscarriages. But now I, in retrospect, think that was still mostly me. And that I had a string of miscarriages, got through those, blessed with a second child, everything set up, and I decided to go back into my cycling again because I wanted to stay fit and healthy, and I'm a competitive so-and-so. So I did some local racing, and the first race I managed to sustain that dreaded cyclist injury, which is a fractured collarbone. Or clavicle, and I was adverse to medical intervention. So I convinced the orthopedic surgeon that I'm not having surgery or having it plated, even though there was quite a separation. I'm going to rehab it myself, thank you. And though I was very concerned because at that stage I was competing on an indoor cycling platform called Zwift, which many of your listeners may know. It's a very strange computer game, and yet it's one of the fittest computer games out there. And you have to, and I'm very competitive. I'm part of a team. We win money. But my real concern was if I'm going through 12 to 16 weeks of rehabilitation, my activity levels are going to decline. I'm going to get fat and my body composition is going to go in the wrong direction. And so that's when I discovered we have an organization called Low Carb Down Under, which is amazing because they are a bunch of scientists, which is me. They have unpacked the research for me. And so, the likes of Paul Mason, Georgia Eadie, I can't go on, Sean Baker, like there's Zoe Harcom, Tim Noakes, Peter Bruckner, like there are just so many that I filled my brain with. And I went, wow, without putting out that energy, I don't have to change my body composition. I can be starting a low carbohydrate, healthy fats. Probably not keto because that would be more extreme. But yeah, so late 2019, I found myself eating that way and losing weight. Not that I had weight to lose. I was 60 kilos and I've always maintained that sort of stuff, but that didn't mean I was metabolically flexible or healthy. And so, yes, I lost 3 kilos, which was neither here or there. That leads well to this virtual cycling program because it's all about power to weight. And that's what athletes are often obsessed about. So that was tracking in the right way. And yet the transition to that way of eating was a bit woeful. So I would go out for 3-hour rides on my bike and look, an 80-year-old granddad on his bike on the flat could have beaten me because my energy and my output was just so low. So it took me to change the fuel use in my body. It took probably a good 6 months, I would say, where felt like I was back in fighting form. I'd recovered amazingly from this bone fracture, which I would put down to the nutrition that I used, the good fats, the amazing protein content, as to why that healing was so good, and left the specialist a little bit amazed with that rehab without the plate. So again, I was feeling very fantastic that I'd kind of defeated the medical system yet again, and managed it. And so that's the way I had been eating, as I said, for a good 3 years. And then a year ago, I'll get to the carnivore bit, I just decided with my history and the deleterious effects that I'd experienced from plant foods was just, I'd listened more and more to Zoe Harcom, as in fibers not necessary, your Sean Bakers, your Paul Masons who are unpacking it, your long-term carnivores like Amber O'Hearn and Kelly Hogan. And I just went, look, I'm going to take that plunge. My only reservation was, can it be done in a high intense exercise context? And so I spent the good year thinking, well, how do I even omit a pre-race meal? So no sweet potato the night before my race. And I have come to the conclusion that it's actually doable. Maybe not for a 3-hour race, but for the hour and a half that I have to put out and I'm winning races in this. And when you look into the area of athletes and low carbohydrate performance, the jury's still out. And there's still this, maybe you'll need to, depending on each individual, supplement a little bit with carbs, a bit of white rice. And for me, certainly sweet potato was a no-go because of its high oxalate content. So when I went to the carnivore diet, it coincided with stresses externally. So we had COVID lockdowns, we had homeschooling stress, I had a death of a family member, and it was a perfect storm. And I also decided my immune system needed to be boosted. So I threw in a lot of vitamin C, which I now know from the likes of Sally K. Norton, Elliot Overton, brilliant minds in the oxalate space, that they could have triggered that real oxalate effects in conjunction with histamine as well. So I had to play with aged meats and aged cheeses. I had a rash on my face for 4 months. It was like a hive, and I tried salt therapy and various external practices, and it wasn't going until I managed the aged meats and the Parmesan cheese, which I love. I just had to omit for a while, and I also had to look at my oxalate content. And so that's now a good 9 months later, where I'm on top of those things, acknowledging that oxalate dumping, again, could take years and can resurface at times like every menstrual cycle. At certain times of the month, I will dump more. I'll have, some altered bowel stuff from that oxalate stuff. And so I think for different individuals, it can play out to more of an effect. Those crystals can reside in our bodies for years. I know that healing has come a long way for my gut, particularly, but still acknowledge that things like, the polyunsaturated and the omega-6 stuff that reside in our tissues can take decades to come and to go. So, look, I feel, as I said in the beginning, I feel 10 years, I'd say, younger than when I did in my early 30s, grappling with these things. And I don't like regrets, but if I discovered it back then, yes, I would have looked differently in those 20 years. But also for the athletic performance side of things, my wonderings now is, what would that carnivore diet look like when I was an elite cyclist for 6 years? It's kind of cool.
Well, I want to say that I'm very sorry for your losses with all your miscarriages and your family member that you lost. So you found the carnivore diet. Was it through keto that you found it? And did you?
Yeah.
You said you had some rashes on your face and stuff.
Yeah. So I think, for a long time, I like many carnivores or ketovores, I don't like to be dogmatic about that, in that, we're only going to eat beef and water, or we're going to omit all dairy. I think what was delightful for me is the incorporation of dairy, because for a long time I have absolutely loved dairy. And if any naturopath had told me, well, they did actually, they said, look, you've got allergies and insensitivities related to dairy intolerance, and you're an O negative blood type, ergo you should not have dairy. So that freedom to eat dairy again is profound for me, and I tolerate it really well. And so, yes, I found the carnivore diet, as I said, just close to a year ago. And that has been, and like many of our participants in this diet, they've come from a keto, like there's often a spectrum, you know, they might start paleo-ish like me, real foods, omit the processed foods. Keto is great. It ticks a heap of boxes. And yet, again, my competitive nature and my marginal gains, I have to get optimal health, not just A-OK health, because I've lived this for a long time. And if I can get even further gains, and it comes from the immense healing capacity of the carnivore diet, not that it's right for everyone, but I would argue it's probably the way we evolved. And I firmly believe, based on my research as a gastroenterology area, that we are designed as hunter-gatherers to eat primarily meat. And that's a firm belief I have. As to how it looks for an individual, it's going to be tweaked. Can they tolerate dairy? Can they not? I'm delighted I can. I can overdo the heavy cream because it's just so yummy. What I eat on my carnivore diet isn't as heavy based meat as some. Like, I do incorporate the eggs. I'm very, very into prioritizing protein these days. And so my practices now are making sure I get 2 to 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram. So for me, 60 kilos, that's 150 grams. That's a lot. It's a lot more a day than the World Health Organization advocates for. And that's because I'm an athlete who trains 15 hours a week and wants to be competitive, and yet wants to have, I've got normal menstrual function, my mental health. Yes, I still react when the kids bicker and fight, but I describe it as being, there's a buffer there. There's a new calmness. There is a not so reactive sort of response. My gut health, as I said, is still normalizing, and it's based on, I think sometimes someone will add some spices to the meat that they're cooking, and that's something like turmeric or cinnamon or curcumin. They can set me off, and so that the next day can be interesting in terms of, the toilet visits, but it's not nearly like it was. And so I still think there's progress to be had there. I do incorporate a whey protein concentrate, not the isolates, because it's full of rubbish. I want 100%, and it's high in its protein, and I add that to yogurt. So I can tolerate yogurt now, which is, again, a little bit of that good bacteria works well for me, and it boosts up my protein intake. The other thing I have really worked is on the intermittent fasting idea. So I don't like prolonged fasting. I tried it in my early keto days, and I think not even necessary for our gender, but I think the increase in cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, catecholamines is just a little bit of a real added stress to my body that I don't need. And it really made me very moody and not sustainable. So that's the prolonged fast stuff. So the 2-3 days. I agree with the Steve Finney that I don't think it's good for athletes in that context. But the intermittent, or what I've done, is reduce my eating window. And there's no prescription to it because it's intuitive for me now, in the sense I eat when I'm hungry. I'm a hedonist. If I'm hungry, I will eat, and I will eat protein. I have incorporated Maria Emmerlich's protein sparing bread because, again, it's that, the egg whites. I don't have a problem with egg whites. I do like to use those yolks and make a beautiful keto ice cream, which is literally heavy whipping cream, yolk, a little bit of MCT oil and some vanilla essence, and it's yum. And I'm getting the whole egg is there. I'll eat that shortly after the protein sparing bread. I try to move away from being too structured and counting, because that would take me back to eating disorder days, unhealthy behaviors that I don't believe are sustainable. But to get to that intuitive stage, it's taken me ages, and it's being kind to myself. Look, I'm a type A personality. It's all or nothing. There's no cheat days. There's no desire even. I mean, the lasting non-carnivore things in my day were macadamia nuts and dark chocolate, like 95%. And someone might look at that and say, well, that's not too bad, Vicky. That's okay. But it was still a crutch for me. So when I was emotionally stressed and I needed food because my children were fighting or my baby was screaming, that I didn't think that wasn't a healthy behavior for me. I'd much rather go out in nature, get a walk, and remove that and replace it with something that's going to serve me better. So I'm delighted to say it feels very freeing. The other aspect of freedom is the non-supplements. So again, for as long as I can remember, I thought my nutritional things were going to be satisfied by getting this supplement and this one off the shelf. So I would have, so many supplements. I used to take amino acids in their pure form, so taurine and arginine, and it was like a pharmacy lab in my fridge. How about you just eat meat? Why, obviously it pains me to think of the commercial stuff and the side of it where, a very poor student at school and uni, just to get it by, was forking out so much money and stuff on all of these supplements. So the only supplements I take now are Elements, which I absolutely adore because of its, and again, I get no endorsements from Element, but those electrolytes are just the goods for life in Australia. We sweat quite a lot, and I sweat a lot as an indoor cyclist. And it's when you're feeling nauseous, when you're feeling a bit average, having a drink of that, sipping on that, they're amazing. The other one I've played around with is I'm really working to heal maybe years of mitochondrial damage. And so I'm very interested in tweaking that. And so I have been playing with B1 as a vitamin because of its interaction in the mitochondria pathways and energy production. And that's, again, I sit okay with that. Look, I've tried exogenous ketones as that as well. But again, it all feels very commercial, and it feels very much like, well, try to derive most of it from real food, because that also is a message that others can achieve, right? If I'm selling something, doesn't sit well with my ethos and my belief, and it also doesn't make it as accessible. People say meat's expensive, and I think we're going to go that way with the current world. But, you can get a pretty cheap chuck steak and put a slow cooker to it and feed your family of 4. And that's what I aspire, and that's doable. I can go past the McDonald's drive-in, not that I do this much, but you could get just the burger patty, a quarter pounder, and you could have 5 or 6 of those. My friend does it regularly, and, she's a carnivore too. So, yeah, it's really doable, and I want to make that message clear that not just the more socioeconomic stable people can do this. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So you had a lot of healing already, and you're still working on healing, it sounds like, some. And do you think your keto got you through a lot of your healing? And then how about carnivore? Did it give you extra healing?
Yeah, I think I'm still a work in progress. I hope to be a work in progress until the day I die, in every sense. So I now sit okay with, because again, I think maybe it's my blessing or my curse. As I said, I experienced a lot of health issues in early in life, which some people don't actually face until they're, middle age onwards, right? The insulin resistance, the pre-diabetes, the autoimmune stuff make their surface then. So I experienced it then. So it feels like most of my adult life, right? To say I have arrived would not be correct yet, because I still think, and mostly exciting for me is, as I said, N equals 1, but in that athletic space, because, I used to think as an elite athlete, that you could have performance nutrition and then you'd have your health, and that they were mutually exclusive. Now I understand, well, yes, I'm not doing the length of racing I used to or training full-time hours, but I'm still demanding a lot from my body physically and mentally. And as I said, it's chalk and cheese in the space of 3 years. I discovered keto because I wanted to refine my body composition without the energy output. And what I discovered was so much more, in the sense that, my menstrual regularity, which I see as a key thing in a premenopausal state, is still being a great thing because of, the bone, particularly the bone density. And in cyclists, that has been a concern for eons. But now understanding that, yes, you need weight training and bone loading, but if your protein is on point, that you can go into DEXA scans with confidence. And we've seen research where, when you start to separate groups of women in a menopausal state, like we've all banged on about vitamin D and calcium and even K2, and yet if they're upping their protein, that bodes well. So I've healed, but also it ticks my box in the performance space, which is really, again, you can probably hear my passion for that because I like to win still and I like to be super competitive. And my wonderings was, but can it be, oh, gee, but it's metabolic flexibility, which is yes, I'm still going to utilize sugars. I make sugars, great. For those intense bouts of cycling, which, I've done even before the rest of the world has woken up often. I'm doing it 12 o'clock in the middle of night sometimes because I like this sport. But the healing, so yes, I thought, well, you've got performance nutrition and then you've got healing nutrition. So you could perform, but you've still got to expect those gut disturbances, like that 30 minutes before the race, that's going to happen. Or for the 6 years that I was racing my bike, I didn't have a menstrual cycle. I had no periods. And in the cycling world, well, certainly where I was, that was kind of a good thing because you didn't have to worry about it. We now know, and there's this thing called REDS now, which is the relative energy deficiency syndrome, which I think could be addressed with a more animal-based diet rather than just talking about increasing people's calories in general. Because if you take a female athlete and you just add a lot more carbohydrates and energy to them, they're still going to have the underlying metabolic issues. Yes, they might have a menstrual cycle, but what does that look like for their bone health later on? What does that look like for their fertility issues, which I faced? And so I'm concerned, and I watch that space, which is the mainstream sports medical sort of space. And I still look very alternative, of course. And no, I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not even a doctor. But if I can maybe just, give some advice or information to one person at a time in either the athletic space or certainly in the type 2 diabetes space, which I'm incredibly interested in, then, that's nice for me.
Yes, that's excellent. So Vicki, you are a coach on Revero. And could I ask you, what is your coaching strategy? What would somebody expect when they come to you and ask for information about carnivore diet?
It sounds sort of trite, but I'd say make sure you do you. So what I mean by that is there is no one diet, and I have to be very careful that I don't get on my little podium and get all dogmatic, because I could just be like the vegetarian that I don't dislike but empathize with. And so I don't want that polarization. And certainly that person who comes to me for coaching can use me for all of my knowledge. I'll be happy to share and my experiences, and they can use me as a model because they're a rookie, they're starting out, they need some structure and guidance. But then it's about and look, nutrition, as I said, can tick on many boxes, but it's the other lifestyle aspects. So for me, a big theme is the mindset. Like if you decide to go all in, all right, and chuck out every single non-animal-based thing in your pantry, what are you going to do when the kids drive you crazy with homeschooling? Are you going to go to the pantry and have a breakdown because you can't access that? So for some personalities, it's going to mean doing it gently. And whilst that riles against my personality, which is all or nothing, like why wouldn't you do? Thankfully, I've wisened up that people are all different and they need to do it in the ways that work for them and take one day at a time. It is truly a journey rather than, let's look like Vicki, right? And I might look like that model and epitome of health, which I strive for my own motivation, but you're not going to look like me and my diet. So I work hard to facilitate what's going on. I can't be everyone's everyone, right? So that's acknowledging maybe you need to seek out psychological services or counseling to address, past traumas. And that's why, because we don't just eat because we're hungry. That's, of course we don't. The diet in itself is very simple, like eat meat, eat animal products. You don't have to be a chef or a baker. I'm certainly not one, right? I want to just throw in that meat in the pan. So it's very accessible and it is cost effective. I can show people that. But it's all the other factors around that. And I can work with their lifestyle. So I could look at their sleep hygiene. I could look at their stress management. I could look at replacing that emotional desire to stress eat with a walk in nature. So I work hard on all of those things, but I also acknowledge that everyone's individual DNA and differences. And that's why I think the risk of social media, and why I don't post pre and post photos of myself, because essentially I like to look at nice blood tests. I like to look at people feeling internally motivated. They're ticking the goals that are for them, rather than trying to be something out there, which is still, yes, they may be real before and after shots. And I don't, judge those who choose to do it that way. Okay. The other coaches in life. But for me, it really is about health, and that's not external to me. That's my belief. And that you don't have to be an elite athlete. You don't have to strive for physical feats. Everyone's got their goals, and they should be respected and tweaked accordingly. I think I'm very much into, leading on from that, I suppose, goals besides weight loss. Look, it's a sideshow. The healing has to happen. And that healing, there's no set period. Like, it's not 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And people new to keto, or they're often looking for, how long is it going to take, doc? How long? And hopefully it doesn't take 25 years like me. But really, those, again, those vegetable oils or seed oils that people have had in their, or the oxalates, or things that are going to take time. So patience is key. And to keep people on, well, first there's the inertia. Like, I don't want to do this, because if it just looks like any other diet, it won't be sustainable. So the key is sustainability. I want to do this until I die. I don't desire at this point in time a plant food or a vegetable. I may in the future, and I certainly won't feel guilty about it. But what it takes time for healing. And again, it's that sort of the weight loss. Oh, you're supposed to lose 1.5 kilos a week, and it should be like this. And look, again, I'm not people's doctors. And so where I really like to work with people is with their medical practitioners and GPs to get those blood tests done, because they may come to it with a goal of weight loss at the start of the game. But what are their other ongoing, comorbidities, which we know is very big in this world at the moment with this pandemic, that those people aren't going to face a virus as well. So I really like to tap in and get those blood tests done that they're not getting done, right now all the time. So I would like to work with people in a network. So if that's someone's, they've got their psychologist, or their, how's their spiritual health, these other things that I'm not going to be that to everyone. But let's spike their curiosity to what sort of parts in their lifestyle and in their life need to be addressed besides nutrition. The other way I work is set them off with that failure will happen. It's a given. I think that, again, it's just my perception, but someone can look at me and think, wow, you've just got it all. Like, look at you, and that, again, that's just my perception, but I've had more losses than I've had wins. And that at the end, the outcome, you get there. And I've got that growth mindset, which is, to keep improving things. If something could be tweaked, then I'm there. I'm reading the research. I want to know, and I'm happy to share that with people. But know that, you don't just fall off the wagon. You could treat each day at a time. Like, it's about breaking their goals down and saying, tomorrow's a new day. Yes, you ate, I don't know, cake at that lunchtime thing that you regret, and you feel guilty, and you might as well just give this whole diet up because you've failed. Look, failure should lead to learning. It should lead to, perseverance and strengthening the individual, rather than just, again, it sounds again trite, but being kind to oneself and compassionate, that this is ongoing and you haven't failed. And that other voice on your shoulder that's telling you, look, like every other diet you've been on, this is just going to look like another one of those. And unless you can have your goals, broken down, your motivations in the right place. What is your why? Why do you want to do this? What does it look like for you to have health? Is it playing with the grandkids? Is it running? I don't know. It's different for everyone. So really tapping into those things besides just, I want to lose 10 kilos, which in the fitness industry, I've been there. It just feels so superficial. And look, more often than not, we know how many diets fail, right? Are we just going to be another one of those? Is this just the trend of 2020s, you know. I believe it won't be, but that's a messaging, and it's a lot of walking with people, being, you know, in the trenches, rather than just saying, oh, come on, why can't you do this? And that's my learnings as a coach too, or as a person. Hopefully I've wizened that not everyone's a type A like me, and they can't just clear out everything and go heck into it, right? That's me. But people are different, thankfully. So that's it. The final thing would be to find a tribe, because, and whether that is, you know, because it can be quite isolating. Like I've heard a lot of, like I look like a freak. I'm an outlier on a number of fronts in life anyway, which I won't go into. But this is just another one where, you know, at the dinner table, when I'm rejecting the plant foods and I'm just eating lamb, you know, we eat for social reasons. It can look crazy. So if you don't have this robust, you know, assurance of what you're doing is fine, then you can really feel bent and be, you know, by the social pressures. I don't, because I feel like I've become quite a strong, and I'm a very stubborn person. So that's within my, you know, my own family, but also my friends. I don't have any qualms about fasting at a dinner venue, because that's what I do. But that's not the case for everyone, and they can really lapse into, you know, what are they going to do? So they have to have a plan, you know, what it's going to look like when I go to that gathering at Christmas time or Thanksgiving. What is it going to look like? How am I going to prepare? Am I going to bring my own dish? But then also having, so around, you know, the criticisms which we get, which can feel isolating. Oh, this is just too extreme, you know, but how is it more extreme than a vegetarian way? I mean, but it is seen by society, and it's still very wacky and crazy. So therefore I must have to ring my carnivore friend and go for a walk with her that afternoon, and everything's okay again. Or I can get on a Facebook group like Carnivore Fit Chicks, just to say, and I can be inspired that, again, I'm not alone in this. There are other weird and wacky people who are doing this. And again, they're cheering you on, they're picking you up, they're not pressuring you and putting you down and saying you're going to die of a heart attack tomorrow, or not eating fiber, you're going to get bowel cancer. Because those people are, you know, look, I don't want to rule them out of my life. They're planning, that's not going to happen. But it's my strategies and how I'm going to prepare. And I'm also going to have, you know, if I can just ring up, and I've got groups in Canberra where I live, where I can have my rant to them and they get me and they understand me. And it's the same with, you know, being part of Revero Health and its community. We are people of communities, and we can't do a lot on our own. And this is a real example where you can really sink and get quite down and thinking that you're really on a very warped, crazy path. And again, I'm sitting waiting for the research, you know, the David Ludwigs, who are putting out, you know, some good studies, you know, and comparing the right diets rather than this carnivore one, because again, we still don't know, but at the same time, we've got enough, you know, anecdotal stuff. A lot of us know how amazing we feel and how we wouldn't want to revert back there. But me being a scientist, I'm still like, oh, but what if? Like, what if I've, you know, in 5 years? But I don't think, well, none of the diets can show that if you eat this way, that in 30 years, you're going to die of this. We're all going to die. And I feel how right now can I feel this great and have my blood test on point and it be wrong? But you need that affirmation, I think, from others who are feeling that way, and those boosts, not just false boosts, but like, okay, I'm not this crazy outlier who's doing this wacky thing. And yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think it's a wonderful strategy, and you know, like carnivore being a healing diet, because it really is. So I thank you, Vicki, so much for coming and sharing your success with us. And if anyone needs a carnivore coach from Revero, look up Vicki. She will help you out a lot. She's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of passion. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. It was just a pleasure. And yeah, look, I hope to engage with Revero Health a lot more in the future.
Awesome. We'll see you around, Vicki.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Join Rivero.health for a 30-day free trial to get access to live Q&A with VIP guests, social community meetings, member discounts, low-carb healthcare providers list, forum, workouts, monthly challenges, early access to podcasts, recipes, carnivore diet guide, fasting guide, shred guide, and much more.